Welcome to Fantastic Vision. Please subscribe us before you watch today's video. Nowadays, chip-related companies in the United States are essentially navigating a calamity, one after another. For example, Apple and TSMC have both increased their investments in the US to avoid the impact of the Trump administration's tariff increase. For this reason, they were exempted from the Trump administration's 100% tariff on semiconductors. But now, news has emerged of new US chip regulations, something Apple, TSMC, and others likely didn't anticipate. A new crisis has arrived. According to the Wall Street Journal, the Trump administration plans to introduce yet another new chip regulation, the 1-to-1 chip ratio plan, aimed at significantly reducing reliance on overseas chip manufacturing, stimulating domestic production, and reshaping the global supply chain. The so-called 1-to-1 chip ratio plan requires chip companies to achieve a 1-to-1 ratio of chips, meaning the number of chips manufactured in the US and those sourced from overseas must be equal. If this ratio is not achieved, the excess chips will be subject to the 100% semiconductor tariff. It's no wonder that chip-related companies in the US are essentially facing a difficult time. Previously, Trump announced a 100% tariff on imported semiconductors, but exempted companies that already had factories in the US, or had pledged to do so. As a result, not only American companies like Apple and Nvidia, but also foreign companies like TSMC and Samsung, increased their investments in the US. Trump then declared that they could all be exempted from the tariffs because of their large-scale investments. However, not long after, the Trump administration announced new chip regulations that would affect all of these companies. The first to be affected were American companies like Apple and Nvidia, as they primarily design chips, leaving the majority of chip manufacturing to TSMC, Samsung, and other companies. Consequently, these US chip design companies import the vast majority of their chips. Of course, this isn't their fault. After all, US chip manufacturing capabilities are already lagging behind. Not only has US chip manufacturing capacity plummeted to less than 10% of global production, but domestic advanced chip manufacturing technology is also lagging behind. Although Intel, a US company, is still pursuing advanced process technology, its advanced processes have yet to gain recognition from major customers. In recent years, the US has continuously interfered with the global semiconductor industry, imposing drastic chip restrictions on China. However, rather than hindering China's chip development, these restrictions have actually led to a significant increase in China's chip manufacturing capacity, and advanced process technology has begun to break through. Thus, to protect its advantage in advanced process chips, the US has begun accelerating the expansion of its domestic advanced chip manufacturing capacity. Despite recent US chip legislation, substantial chip subsidies, and the threat of tariffs after Trump's presidency, global wafer giants like TSMC, and Samsung have invested in and established factories in the US, but overall progress seems bleak. It should be noted that TSMC, Samsung, and other companies are, after all, companies. Even under pressure from the US, they must consider the actual situation in the US. While they have increased their investment in the US, the high costs have prevented them from moving too quickly. Thus, the US is incubating a 1-to-1 chip ratio plan, clearly a sign of impatience. Recently, the US Treasury Secretary bluntly stated that the biggest failing of the global economy is that 99% of high-performance chips are produced in Taiwan. On the one hand, the US plan is intended to encourage American companies to use more domestically manufactured chips, particularly supporting Intel. On the other hand, it is intended to continue to pressure foreign companies like TSMC and Samsung. If this 1-to-1 chip ratio plan is implemented, TSMC, Samsung, and other companies' future chip production capacity in the US will need to cover 50% of the demand from American customers. This is no small feat, and it's beyond TSMC's current $165 billion budget. It would likely require several times that. Furthermore, building a wafer fab takes time. From design and planning to construction and mass production, it typically takes about 2 to 3 years. For this reason, the US is reportedly offering chip manufacturers a relief period, but the exact duration is currently unclear. In response, some foreign media outlets have directly commented that the new US regulations are a complete showdown. The US now doesn't consider whether wafer fabs are willing or able to bear the burden. If they fail to meet the requirements, they will be subject to a 100% tariff. If this happens, US chip design giants will be forced to purchase more expensive US-made chips. Chipmakers like TSMC and Samsung will have to continue expanding their US investments and accelerating their factory construction, ultimately incurring even greater losses. Some analysts say this US move will not only be ineffective, but will actually accelerate the decline of US chip-related companies.